Hello and welcome to Patriot Pats. My name is Lake Green and I am so excited to be back here for our fifth lecture video in the lecture series titled The Fall of 1776, where we'll be taking an in-depth look at the entire campaign of that fall, the campaign that I believe is the most pivotal time in the entire history of the United States of America. If things don't go right here, if things don't go America's way, and Washington doesn't hold the men together, and divine providence or luck or just things don't break the way they do, we don't have a country. It's that simple. So let's really give it the recognition it deserves. And this fall, again, I'm so excited to be giving it an in-depth look. In this video today, we'll be discussing the fire of New York City, which occurred on September 20th through 21st, 1776, following the Battle of Harlem Heights. About a quarter of the city of New York was burned to the ground in this fire. Before we get into any details about the fire, though, I want to remind you, as I always do, I can only talk about so much in a 10 to 15 minute lecture video, but what I can do is recommend you to a great book. If you want to know more about this, if you're really hungry to learn and this is not enough for you, please read 1776 by David McCullough. It's a phenomenal work. This book will tell you everything you need to know about the 1776 campaign, far more than I can in just a short video. And even if you're not that, much of a reader, but you have an interest in the subject, I really recommend reading this book. It's so easy, it's palatable, it's right there, it's great. It's one of my favorite books ever. So may he rest in peace, David McCullough. Check that book out if you want more. Okay, so the Great Fire of New York occurred on September 20th to 21st, 1776. About 5 or 6 days earlier, the Battle of Harlem Heights occurred. That was actually September 16th, 1776, so 4 to 5 days, where the Americans scored their first small victory in the field against the British Army, and Washington had a small victory, his first victory as Commander-in-Chief, and the Americans' first victory in New York, I must say. But 4 days later, the Americans, in northern Manhattan, waiting for the British next move in Harlem, realized that the city is burning at night. And so what happens, nobody knows, but a massive fire broke out. People think that the origins of this fire was in the modern-day Whitehall ferry terminal. If you're familiar with Lower Manhattan, Battery Park is right there, and the ferry terminal that goes right across New York Harbor to Staten Island. The Staten Island ferry is right there. They believe the fire originated right in that general area. So, again, at the time of the battle, New York City is not the metropolis that we know of today. At the time of this campaign, there's only 3 villages in Manhattan. Number 1, York City, which is situated in Lower Manhattan around Battery Park and extends a little bit north of there. Number 2, to the west, Greenwich Village. And number 3, in the north, Harlem, where the Americans still have possession. So the city only has about 25,000 people. But at the time, that's the second largest city in the entire North American British colonies, only behind Philadelphia, which had 40,000 people. So, just for, comparison, the town I live in today has 55,000 residents. New York City has 25,000, and it's the second largest city in 1776 in the country. So, very different. But nonetheless, for the time, it's a massive city. So, basically, again, the night of September 20th, British are moving into the city. They're quartering their troops. They're trying to get set up with a semblance of order. New York City was not in good shape at this time, might I add. When the Americans retreated a few days prior, they looted and ransacked a lot of the buildings, and the British Army has treated the city no different. There's been looting going on. And also, you have to remember, the city has 25,000 people, but General Howe's army has over 30,000 men alone. So when the British march into New York, into Manhattan, they're effectively doubling the population of the city overnight. So there's a shortage of housing, there's a massive problem in terms of logistics, and the British soldiers are pretty much commandeering any quarters they can to turn into barracks. Anybody who still remains in the city that may have been a patriot is having their property seized. So it's not really a good picture for the British in Manhattan so far. Tensions are high. Nonetheless, with all these factors coming in, fire, boom, comes up in the middle of the night on September 20th. People think that it breaks out near the Whitehall Ferry Terminal. Again, like I stated, near modern-day Battery Park, the Staten Island Ferry. And it's prime conditions for a blaze because there is a strong wind blowing that night, and there has been very dry conditions following torrential rain at the beginning of the month. So it's dry, it's windy, and these flames and the blaze just spreads extremely fast. And even though a lot of civilians attempt to, put the fire out, they're aided by British Marines. Their efforts really don't help much, and the fire ends up spreading north and west along the western side and the northern side of the city. And by early morning, it's still going strong, and it's only in the early afternoon that the blaze is finally put down. In total, between 400 and 1,000 houses, buildings, whatever, are estimated to have been burned to the ground. For context, at the time, New York City had 4,000 buildings. This is about a quarter at most of the city, so just picture that. You already have an army here that numbers over 30,000 men that can't get housing, and now you have a quarter of the city that's just been burned to the ground. It creates a logistical nightmare for the British and only further compounds the problems in the city. I said the city had already been plundered and looted by the Americans when they retreated, and in this fire, a lot of the Hessian and British soldiers took this distraction as an opportunity to leave their posts and go and start looting other people's houses. So there's plundering, there's looting, there's burning. Manhattan is not a good place to be at this time. Ultimately, though, the British will recover, and the problem, even though it will remain a problem in terms of logistics and overcrowding in the city till the end of the war, it's not as bad in the coming weeks because the British, of course, in about a month, will go and attack the Americans, advancing northward into the Bronx, Westchester County, so that kind of alleviates the situation just a little bit. But that has been the Great Fire of New York. Over 1,000 buildings, or about 1,000 buildings, a quarter of the city, were burned. Not a good place to be. Nobody knows who started the fire. The British, in their official reports, Lord Howe, he blames a wretched group who tried to burn the city to the ground. The royal governor of New York, William Tryon, blames Washington himself. That was completely unsubstantiated and not true. Washington himself had asked for permission to maybe burn the city, but Congress denied that, and Washington would never have gone against Congress. It's really unknown who did it, but there's a likelihood, in my historical opinion, there's a likelihood that the American stragglers, patriots that were still in the town may have caused it. Who knows? But that was the Great Fire of New York. Thanks so much for watching. Rate, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Patriot Paths. I'm Lake Green.